Hey, yo, Pro Wrestling Podcast listeners, welcome to the show where we don't sing it, we bring it. Help us out and click subscribe to show your support. While you're at it, if you're a YouTube user, click the bell to enable notifications so they let you know every time a new episode of the Pro Wrestling Podcast goes live. Welcome to this special viewer-requested episode of the Pro Wrestling Podcast, where tonight we're going to run down the March 25th, 1996 episode of WWE Raw is War Monday Night Raw, and this was the go-home episode of Raw ahead of WrestleMania 12. And for those people who don't remember the importance of WrestleMania 12, this was the year that we got to see the Iron Man match between Shawn Michaels and Bret the Hitman Hart. It was also when we got to see the swan song of Diesel as he would face the Undertaker at WrestleMania. So there was a lot heading into WrestleMania that year. We also were teased about the big return of the Ultimate Warrior, the soon-to-be arrival of Mankind, and many other things going on in the WWE world. We're going to run down the show from top to bottom here, and here's the deal. Back in the day, Raw really knew what they were doing. They kicked off the show with Shawn Michaels. He was on his way to the ring, and I love that he was using the click cam. The click being a reference to his partnership or friendship or alliance thereof with Triple H, Razor Ramon, and Diesel, or Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. Knowing that Diesel and Razor were leaving for WCW shortly, it was interesting that they brought out the click cam for him to walk around and film the audience on his way to the ring. I thought this was a great little piece of kind of like backstage humor that now you fast forward all these years, we know exactly what was going on. But in the end, the reality was, at the time, it was a backstage, tongue-in-cheek joke that the boys all probably knew about, but the fans knew very much, a whole lot less about. Very cool stuff. In the first match of the show, we get to see him come to the ring. He's going to take on Leif Cassidy, which, if you don't know who Leif Cassidy is, that's Al Snow. Now, he's out there in almost like the Rockers gear, and that's because he was a member of the New Rockers with Marty Jannetty, Shawn Michaels' former tag team partner. Now, this was kind of weird because at the time, the New Rockers were the baby faces, and I think they purposely did this thing with Leif Cassidy, aka Al Snow, just so they could have Marty Jannetty out there with Shawn Michaels without actually putting the two of them in the ring. Solid match, and one of the things you love about these older Raw episodes is they let every single wrestler who had even an ounce of wrestling talent get some airtime. In this match in particular, Al Snow and Shawn Michaels go a solid 12-13 minutes in their opening match. And keep in mind, back then, the shows were not 3 hours long. As a matter of fact, if you go to WWE Network right now and watch this episode, the entire network episode, because you've taken out all the commercials, and by all the commercials, I mean the network commercials, not WWE's commercials. They're still in there. But they take out the network commercials, it's only a 49-minute show. It was originally a 2-hour show. Over an hour was commercials. It's kind of bizarre if you think about it. Go back and check out the episode. It's really cool. But in this match, great match, solid stuff. Jose Lothario comes out. And if you don't know, that is the man who trained Shawn Michaels. He was a big part of this angle leading up to WrestleMania. And he would be at ringside. Marty Jannetty at ringside. And then at one point, Bret Hart is going to come out on commentary. Because as we know, the big Iron Man match was the thing to do at that point in time. Bret Hart's on commentary talking about the differences between he and Shawn Michaels' perspective on wrestling. You know, Bret Hart has been very vocal over the years talking about how Shawn Michaels was the disgusting side of wrestling at the time, and he was more of the purist, and he was the real quality human being, and Shawn Michaels was like a scumbag to him. And that's kind of the vibe you get from Bret Hart on commentary the whole time he's sitting there with Vince McMahon, who at the time, this is pre-Stone Cold Steve Austin, this is when Vince McMahon is still a commentator every single week. He looked young and energetic, and he was, in my opinion, actually a pretty solid commentator. He sits down with Bret Hart the whole time. At first, Jerry the King Lawler's at ringside. We know that back then, they always played up that there was heat between the Hart family and Lawler. Lawler gets up and leaves the ringside area. Bret Hart's on commentary. At the end of the match, Marty Jannetty interferes. He grabs Shawn Michaels by the back of the trunks, pulls him into the corner. This leads to Bret Hart jumping out of his chair and chasing Marty Jannetty away. At the same time, it allows Shawn Michaels to move out of the way of a Leif Cassidy / Al Snow splash. Hitting sweet chin music covering for the 1, 2, 3, end of match. The interesting part for this was after the match, Bret Hart is confronting Marty Jannetty outside the ring about why he interfered, and Shawn Michaels comes out of the ring and shoves past Bret Hart to yell at Marty Jannetty as well, which leads to Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels getting into it, which has never made sense to me whatsoever. Bret Hart helps Shawn Michaels, helps him secure a win by chasing away the bad guy, or the supposed bad guy, and then for some reason they have a beef because he helped them out. And Shawn Michaels copping an attitude, walking by Bret Hart and shoving him off. Weird little segment there. As a matter of fact, if you're tuning into this episode, you'll notice that this is that altercation is a part of the banner we're putting up for this episode. Good stuff, though. Classic 1990s WWE good guy versus bad guy storyline. Even though at this particular time, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels technically are both baby faces, we already know that by the way they were portrayed, they took on very different roles heading into the WrestleMania 12 match. There's an interview at the end of the match between Bret Hart and Vince McMahon. Bret Hart again reinforcing all the reasons that he's going to take Shawn Michaels down at WrestleMania. But it was solid stuff. Good in-ring work. Great stuff from Al Snow. I've always said Al Snow never got enough credit for his in-ring talent. This is a great match. Shawn Michaels, much like Bret Hart, always able to get the best out of their opponent, similar to what Ric Flair always did. Certain other people, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Some wrestlers just have that skill where they can take the most nominal wrestler and make him look like a megastar. And I am not dumping on Al Snow. I think he's incredible and never got the respect he deserved or the championship accolades he should have gotten with the level of talent that he had. But at the end of the day, this was a good experience to see him. You move on to match number 2 in the WWE Network presentation here. They skip right over a commercial and jump into Aldo Montoya, the Portuguese Man of War, which for those of you who don't know, that is the man who would go on to become Just Incredible, the ECW champion. And in recent years, not been doing so great, battling his demons. We always wish him well, but at this particular time, he's dressed in the bright yellows and greens, and he's this crazy, almost luchador-style character with a mask and everything else. He's in the ring to face a very young Triple H, who's escorted to the ring by these blonde women every week, which was interesting because heading into WrestleMania that year, he was supposed to be facing the Ultimate Warrior. As a matter of fact, right before Triple H comes out, they do a flashback of the Ultimate Warrior saving Hulk Hogan from Sid Vicious and Papa Shango at WrestleMania 8. They show that whole interlude where he charges down to the ring unannounced and everybody's exploding because the Ultimate Warrior was coming to WrestleMania 12 to take on Triple H. And for those who remember, that was the match where the Warrior came out and pretty much squashed Triple H. Looking back at it, if you're trying to build future stars, it's kind of like it was the story of the time for the Ultimate Warrior. They sacrificed so many incredible talents to him, and he always kind of came up short and left them hanging. This was another time where he squashes Triple H, and then within a few months, he was gone from the scene again. But heading into WrestleMania, this was important because Triple H looked very strong. At WrestleMania, interesting bit of news on that, is where he debuted bringing Sable to the ring with him. Sable, at the time, the real-life wife of Mark Merrow, who would shortly thereafter debut for WWE and start a feud with Triple H for Sable's services, which was really done in a way to allow Mark Merrow to have his wife on the road with him the whole time, which really, at the time, was revolutionary. Good stuff. But this was a glorified, it should have been a glorified squash match, but they actually, again, Just Incredible has a lot of in-ring talent, and they let them go a good 10 minutes. You don't see that anymore. Someone on the level of an Aldo Montoya, the Portuguese Man of War, doesn't get that kind of screen time. He did here. Good stuff. Goldust cuts a promo next. He's in the backlot alley for his match against Roddy Piper. He's out there. It looked like the exact same backlot that they had the actual match in. If you don't remember, they had this backyard lot thing. They had Roddy Piper and Goldust driving like a gold Cadillac, Piper driving a white Ford Bronco, tongue-in-cheek reference to the O.J. Simpson situation at the time. Rumor has it was supposed to be an O.J. Simpson match at that year's WrestleMania, but that people decided against that for one reason or another. Instead, it was Roddy Piper put into that role, and Goldust just cuts this insanely androgynous, strange, character promo on this mannequin dressed up like Roddy Piper, almost taking advantage of this doll. You feel bad for the mannequin as you watch the promo before he absolutely obliterates it and destroys it and beats it up and everything else. For those who remember, the match at WrestleMania was actually incredible. Goldust and Roddy Piper really beat the living snot out of each other. At one point, Goldust literally running Piper over with his Cadillac. Piper slamming himself into the hood of the car, getting up, jumping into the Bronco and chasing him all over the streets into the arena, where he pretty much stripped him down to women's lingerie and beat the tar out of him. Great match at WrestleMania. This year, little uncomfortable to watch, just being honest. You have The Undertaker comes out next. He's with Paul Bearer. They have a WrestleMania commercial before they get to The Undertaker's in-ring interview he's going to do with Vince McMahon. What I found funny about this, if you go back to the network and watch this episode, they still leave in the WrestleMania jacket commercial, where you could buy the WrestleMania 12 jacket for $179.95, or 3 easy payments of $59.99, and it's ridiculous. Actually, I believe it was 4 payments of $59.99 because you paid more if you did the payment plan. But I thought, how many people paid $180 for that jacket, and where are those jackets now, fast forward all these years later? But the commercial's still there. You could see what kind of stuff they were selling. Right after the commercial for the jacket, you got a coming soon promo for Mankind. Now, we now know who Mankind is. We know it was going to be Mick Foley, but at that time in 1996, this was right after Mankind left ECW, after cutting the incredible promo that he did about hating the fans, always wanting more blood and all that kind of stuff after the Kane Dewey signs and all that. This is when he was leaving ECW, coming to WWE, and he was going to debut the Monday after WrestleMania. They held off on bringing him in until after the show because they wanted to start new feuds. They always do that right after Raw, or right after Mania, the first Raw afterwards. They do all their new stuff. This was really well done. Then they go back to the ring, which I'd love to know what the heck The Undertaker was doing for all this time that these different commercials and Mankind vignettes and everything are rolling. They go back to the ring. There's highlights of Diesel versus The Undertaker. There's the cage match from In Your House, where The Undertaker came up through the ring and grabbed him and pulled him down in. There's highlights of him the following week on Raw smashing a casket to pieces. Then they put up a banner that says 2 weeks ago, and they show Diesel showing up and beating up Paul Bearer. And then they show last week on Raw, they have Diesel opening a casket, and inside is like a perfect, like Madame Tussauds wax museum quality replica of Diesel inside the casket. I'm telling you right now, I know it's an angle for a television show, but seeing the quality of that thing, I don't know if I could have looked at that. It's so uncomfortable. So then after that, they put up another thing that says, still to come, Owen Hart versus Ahmed Johnson. So we're still getting some commercials in there. We know what the main event of the night is going to be, Hart versus Ahmed Johnson. The Undertaker has his little speech with Vince McMahon. He throws out what he's going to do to Diesel. Good stuff. For those who remember, Diesel was leaving the company after WrestleMania. This was his last big go-around. The Undertaker is going to decimate him at WrestleMania. And it was done well. It was done in a tasteful manner. I actually thought that they did a good job promoting the match leading up to it. You never would have had a suspicion that Kevin Nash was leaving the company. And I guess in hindsight, Vince McMahon always claims that they had a handshake deal that he was staying, and then at the last minute ended up leaving, which was a little shady, but at the time. But looking back at it, I thought they did this very well, because if you didn't know what was going to happen, you didn't see it coming. You know, you would have thought that Kevin Nash was still a part of the company. You come back from another commercial break. There's a strange moment where they have Michael Hayes singing with a music group. I don't know what that had to do with Raw. And then Shawn Michaels and Jose Lothario workout videos are shown. He's doing sit-ups and he's boxing and he's doing this intensive in-ring training, which, by the way, he wrestles with 2 guys who were from the Texas Wrestling Academy that he later went on to be a lead trainer at. And they were really flying around the ring doing some impressive stuff. Then there's a vignette where he's doing inverted push-ups, and there's highlights of his wrestling career, him holding the Intercontinental Championship, the moment where he lost his smile, and it was all a lead-in for a banner of the Iron Man match. And then they switch and they go into Bret Hart's package, where you see him being held down by Stu Hart, the part where Stu like brings his arms back behind his back and you can see the veins popping out of Bret Hart's head. And then you see him suffering in the ring against Diesel and fans adoring Bret Hart. And then he looks over a frozen Calgary, Alberta, Canada, looking kind of lethargic. And then he's doing like a light jog on the treadmill. and then they show him in a pool where he like leisurely starts swimming the breaststroke, and then they have him jogging on the ice. And I remember Bret Hart looking back at this. If you ever watched the Wrestling with Shadows, or if you went back and saw the Bret the Hitman Hart, the Excellence of Execution documentary they did a few years later, where he talked about the lead up to that match and how all the vignettes and videos leading up to their Iron Man match made Shawn look like an Adonis and kind of made him look like the slow, old-fashioned, out-of-shape, rusty old veteran. And when you go back and look at it, they really did do that. They made it very clear just in the vignettes that Shawn Michaels was the one walking out with this championship. And, you know, hindsight's 20/20, but I wish I could have seen that then and realized what it was they were presenting me with, because it was really, it's so lopsided, it's bizarre. I don't even know if they would do that today. You go back to the ring. Owen Hart is heading to the ring. He has Jim Cornette in his corner. That's his manager at the time. Ahmed Johnson comes out, and he's sweating like a stuck pig, and he's got his tongue out, and it looks disgusting. Then you have they're sponsored by Starburst. You know, they always used to put up those candy and Slim Jim and every other sponsorship. Starburst sponsoring Monday Night Raw. They showed Diana Smith in the front row. That would be Davey Boy Smith's wife. The in-ring action is pretty solid. A lot of rest holds and bear hugs. Because let's be honest, I'll be honest with you, I thought Ahmed Johnson was pretty solid back in the day. But now that you look back at his matches, there was a lot of those rest holds, a lot of that stuff that wasn't high impact, high wrestling skill. But he was so big, so buff, so powerful that it was believable. And then they get through some of those. Davey Boy Smith comes out to the ring. Now you've got Davey Boy, you've got Jim Cornette, you've got Owen Hart. And at the moment where Ahmed Johnson sets up Owen Hart for his finishing maneuver, which if anybody doesn't remember, I'll give you 3 seconds. What was it? 1, 2, 3 was the Pearl River Plunge. He got him set up for the Pearl River Plunge, which kind of looked like he was going to do a pedigree. For those who don't remember, it's that double underhook lift up into like a power bomb. He gets double teamed by Owen Hart and the British Bulldog. As they're jumping him, he starts getting the upper hand on the two of them, and Vader hits the ring, and the triple team is on. And while that's going on, you've got Earl Hebner being held off to the side by Jim Cornette, and in a matter of moments, Yokozuna and Jake the Snake Roberts come out, which is kind of coincidental if you think about it. Yokozuna's last match was in the ring with Jake the Snake Roberts before his untimely passing. But Yokozuna, Jake Roberts out. They chase off Vader, knock him over the top rope, get rid of Owen and the Bulldog, and the babyfaces stand tall, except for Ahmed Johnson, who's literally laying on the mat on all fours and just looks like he is a beaten dog, which is strange considering he had just made a huge comeback on the three of them, and suddenly he can't move. But that's how they ended the show, with the in-ring stuff. And then at the very end, they bring back the Bret Hart video. It's almost as if they were like, man, we didn't give Bret Hart enough screen time with his earlier promo video. We better give him some more. And while we're doing that, why don't we make it look like he really is in a bad way? So they start out by showing all his fans and how exhausted he is in the ring. And then there's footage of him filming episodes of the TV series Lonesome Dove that he was on. That was that Western series he was on for a little while. And then they showed him cutting promos in the backstage area, which I find incredibly strange, because they show him with a script in his hand reading through his promo prior to presenting it to camera. Which back then, kayfabe was a big deal. You know, yes, people knew it wasn't real. They knew things were staged. But you expect your superstars to cut their promos and have them memorized. You didn't really think about it back then as, oh my gosh, this guy's reading a script. This is a little weird. But they did that. They left that in there for you. So all in all, I actually think the episode was pretty solid. You know, especially the level of work, the quality of the wrestling itself was absolutely on par with anything that's out there today. It really does hold up. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, people like that are just incredible in the ring. And even people like Just Incredible, Leif Cassidy, a.k.a. Al Snow, Owen Hart, all those guys, solid in-ring performers. So there really was not a weak match on the card, but there also wasn't a lot of wrestling on the show. There was in terms of the amount of time allotted per match, but there weren't a lot of matches. And this is the go-home episode to WrestleMania 12, where we get to see the boyhood dream come true for Shawn Michaels, and we get to see the end of Diesel and the rise of The Undertaker, and we get to see the Ultimate Warrior return and destroy Triple H, kneeling on his chest to pin him in their, 45-second match, and all this other insanity. And all this lead up and you only got 3 matches on the card. Little strange by today's standards, because back then, people considered them to be incredible. And nowadays, if we got a Monday Night Raw and only had 3 matches on it, we'd be screaming at the top of our lungs. Yet we feel like, and you see people blog all the time about wrestling back then was so much better. It's not that good anymore. Well, that's nonsense. And if you don't believe me, go back and check the March 25th episode, 1996 of Monday Night Raw, Raw is War, because it was definitely a very different presentation than what we're used to now. That's all the time we have for this episode. Check back with us next time. We'll take your requests. Do it through the Fro Wrestling Sound Off line. Do it through our Facebook page, our Discord group, or any of our social media channels. We love your shout outs. We love your requests. Thank you so much, Nick, tonight for making this request. We hope you liked the episode. Check them out on our Patreon channel, patreon.com/Fro Wrestling Podcast. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.